The rain hammered against the windows of our shared apartment as Silas grabbed my shirt and pulled me in, his lips crashing against mine in a desperate kiss that I dreamed of for years. Before I could even catch my breath, I knew I just lit the fuse that would blow my entire life apart. It had started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself later. Holden, my best friend since our freshman year at Northwestern, had been dating Silas for 3 years now. They were the golden couple in our Chicago circle, the lawyer and the teacher, always hosting brunches and posting those perfect photos from their trips to Michigan. I was the third wheel, the loyal best friend Ryan, who helped them move into this apartment in Lincoln Park and listened to their fights about whether to adopt a dog or plan a big vacation. I never admitted to anyone, not even myself on most days, how my heart raced every time Silas smiled at me across the dinner table or asked for my opinion on a book he was reading for his high school English class. That night Holden was out of town for a case in New York. Silas had come home from a long day at school looking drained. We ordered Thai food and cracked open a bottle of wine to celebrate the end of his grading period. Conversation flowed easily, as it always did between us. He talked about feeling stuck, how Holden was pushing for them to open up their relationship because things had gotten routine. I listened, my chest tight, offering what I hoped were supportive words. As the rain intensified, Silas stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the city lights. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with someone who really sees me," he said softly. Our eyes met and the air shifted. Before I knew it, we were standing close, too close. His hand touched my arm, and then the kiss happened, tentative at first, then filled with years of unspoken tension. It wasn't just physical, it felt like coming home after being lost. We pulled apart, both breathing hard. Ryan, Silas started, his eyes wide with shock and something else I couldn't name. I stepped back, guilt crashing over me like the storm outside. "This can't happen," I whispered, even as my heart screamed otherwise. He nodded, but the damage was done. The next morning I woke to a dozen missed calls from Holden. My phone buzzed again as I stared at it. "What the hell did you do?" the text read. Silas must have told him. Or maybe Holden had seen something on Silas's phone. My stomach dropped. By afternoon our group chat was exploding with messages. Friends I'd known for years were calling me a traitor, a backstabber. Holden's best friend from law school posted a vague story about loyalty and betrayal that everyone knew was about me. I tried calling Silas, but it went to voicemail. Sitting alone in my room, the reality hit me hard. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Holden wasn't just my best friend, he was like a brother. And now, because of one moment of weakness, I had become the villain in everyone's story. The worst part was the small voice in my head asking if it was worth it. As I packed a bag, unsure where to go, I realized my life in Chicago was over. The man I loved had a partner, and I had just made sure everyone knew exactly how I felt. Little did I know this was only the beginning of the isolation that would force me to confront who I really was. I left the apartment before Silas could return. The streets of Lincoln Park felt colder than usual, even though the rain had stopped. My phone kept vibrating with notifications from people I considered family in the gay community here. One message from our mutual friend Marcus stood out. "You ruined everything, Ryan. Holden is devastated. How could you do this to him?" I didn't reply. What could I say? That I'd been in love with Silas for 2 years? That every time I saw them together I smiled through the pain because I wanted Holden to be happy? None of that mattered now. I had become the other man, the homewrecker, the one everyone loved to hate. By evening I was crashing on a coworker's couch in Wicker Park. My job at the marketing firm suddenly felt precarious too. I had landed it through Holden's connections after all. Would they fire me over this? The thought made my hands shake as I stared at the ceiling. Growing up in a small town outside Chicago, I had always hidden parts of myself to fit in. Coming out in college had been liberating, but now it felt like a curse. The same community that once embraced me was turning its back because I had broken the unwritten rules of loyalty among gay men. Sleep didn't come easy. I replayed the kiss over and over, the way Silas's hand had lingered on my cheek, the softness in his voice when he whispered my name. It wasn't just lust. There was something deeper, a connection that went beyond the surface. But at what cost? Holden had been there for me through my parents' divorce, through my first heartbreak with that guy in sophomore year. He had introduced me to Silas, thinking we'd all become this perfect trio. Now I had shattered it all in one rainy night. The next day I tried to go to work like normal, but the whispers started immediately. Colleagues who knew Holden through social events avoided my desk. My boss pulled me aside for a vague talk about maintaining professional boundaries. I nodded through it all, feeling smaller with every word. By lunch I was scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures of the three of us at Pride last year, laughing like nothing could touch us. Now those memories felt tainted. I deleted the album, but the emptiness in my chest only grew. That evening Silas texted me for the first time since the kiss. "We need to talk. Meet me at the park by the lake." I knew it was a bad idea, but I went anyway. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, casting a golden glow on the water. Silas looked exhausted, his usual bright eyes dimmed by regret. "Ryan, what we did. It was a mistake. Holden is my partner. Can't lose him." His words cut deep, but I saw the hesitation in his posture, the way he wouldn't quite meet my gaze. "I know," I said, forcing a smile even as tears threatened. "I won't fight for something that isn't mine." But as I walked away, I wondered if that was true. The guilt was crushing, but so was the realization that for the first time in years I felt truly seen. Chicago had always been my home, but now it felt like a cage. I had to figure out how to rebuild or run. The journey ahead would test every part of me, the friendships I thought were unbreakable, the family ties I still clung to, and the identity I had fought so hard to claim. Weeks blurred into a haze of avoidance and awkward silences. I moved out of the shared circle entirely, renting a tiny studio in Andersonville where the rainbow flags still waved, but my name was now poison. Holden hadn't spoken to me directly since that first angry text. Instead, he sent his sister to pick up his things from my old place, her eyes cold as she loaded boxes into her car. "You're dead to him, Ryan," she said flatly before driving off. The words stung more than any insult because I knew she meant it. At work, the tension escalated. My boss called me into a meeting with HR, citing complaints about creating a hostile environment. No one said it outright, but everyone knew it was about the Holden situation. I sat there defending myself with careful words about personal matters, staying personal, but inside I was crumbling. The gay community in Chicago was tight-knit and word traveled fast. Invites to events dried up. Even my therapist, who I had seen for years, suggested we take a break because she knew Holden socially. Felt like the entire city was closing in on me. One afternoon, I got a call from my mother back in the suburbs. She had heard from a friend of a friend. "Ryan, what is this mess with Holden? You know how hard it was for us when you came out. Now this?" Her voice cracked with disappointment, the same tone she used when I told her I was gay at 19. I tried to explain, but the words stuck. "How do you tell your conservative parents that you fell for your best friend's boyfriend? That one kiss had exposed every insecurity I carried about love and belonging?" She hung up after a long silence, promising to pray for me. The call left me staring at the wall for hours. Silas reached out again, this time at a coffee shop near his school. He looked thinner, his teacher lanyard hanging loose around his neck. "Ryan, I can't stop thinking about that night," he admitted, his voice low. "Holden and I are fighting constantly. He wants space, but I don't know if I can fix it." Part of me wanted to reach across the table and pull him close again, but I held back. "This isn't fair to any of us," I replied. "You have to choose, Silas. I won't be the reason your relationship ends." He nodded, tears in his eyes, but as we parted, I saw the conflict raging in him. That night, alone in my studio, I journaled for the first time in years, pouring out the confusion, the shame, the flicker of hope. Being gay in America wasn't just about parades and acceptance anymore. It was about these quiet battles, the ones no one posted about on social media. I thought about my younger self, the kid who hid magazines under his bed, afraid of what his family would say. Now at 28, I was facing the same fear, but from the people who were supposed to understand. The isolation pushed me to question everything. Was love worth this pain? Was I even capable of real connection without destroying everything around me? The following weekend, I drove out to my sister's house in the suburbs, hoping for some neutral ground. She greeted me with a hug, but her husband stayed distant in the kitchen. We sat on the porch with coffee, and she listened as I spilled the story. "Ryan, you have to make it right with Holden," she said gently. "But how?" I asked. "The damage is done." She sighed, and for a moment I saw the same prejudice I had fought my whole life reflected in her eyes. It wasn't outright hate but the subtle judgment that made me feel like an outsider even in my own family. Back in the city, the backlash intensified. A mutual friend organized a group dinner excluding me and posted photos that felt like a deliberate slap. Silas texted late one night saying Holden had found old messages between us and was threatening to end things. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked the empty streets of Andersonville until dawn, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if I had never met Silas? What if I had told Holden how I felt years ago? The questions looped endlessly. Work became unbearable. I started applying for jobs in other cities, quietly packing my life into boxes. A headhunter in Seattle reached out after seeing my portfolio, and suddenly a new start seemed possible. But leaving meant admitting defeat. It meant letting the hate win. I sat on my bed staring at my laptop, the cursor blinking on the application form. The choice felt like another betrayal, this time of myself. Through it all, Silas remained a constant shadow in my thoughts. We met one more time at the lakefront, his hand brushing mine accidentally as we walked. The spark was still there, raw and undeniable. "Ryan, if things were different," he started, but I cut him off. "They aren't. You have to fight for what you have." My words were firm, but my heart was breaking. Walking away that day, I felt the weight of every decision pressing down. The city that once felt like home now echoed with whispers of my name as the most hated man. I had to find a way to survive it or let it consume me completely. The job offer from Seattle came through faster than I expected. A marketing position with better pay and a chance to start fresh. I accepted it without telling anyone, not even Silas. Packing up my studio felt like erasing the last traces of my old life. Boxes stacked against the wall held memories of brunches with Holden and late nights talking with Silas. I kept one photo hidden at the bottom of a suitcase, the three of us at a Cubs game smiling like the world was ours. Before I left, I owed one final conversation with Holden. He agreed to meet at a neutral park bench in Grant Park, his face hardened by weeks of anger. "You really did it, Ryan," he said, his voice steady but eyes full of pain. "Silas told me everything." I sat there listening as he listed every way I had betrayed him, the late nights, the secret glances, the way I had inserted myself into their relationship. I didn't defend myself because there was no defense. "I'm sorry," I said simply. "I never meant to hurt you." He laughed bitterly. "But you did. And now the whole group sees you as the guy who destroys what others build." The words landed like punches, but I absorbed them. Holden had been my anchor through coming out, through my first job struggles. Seeing him broken because of me forced a new level of self-reflection. As he walked away, I stayed on the bench watching the boats on the lake. This was the consequence I had chosen. The hate wasn't just external anymore. It lived inside me too, a constant reminder of my choices. That evening, Silas showed up at my door unannounced. His eyes were red from crying. "Holden kicked me out temporarily," he said, collapsing onto my couch. "He thinks there's more between us than there is." I sat across from him, the air thick with unspoken words. "There is more, Silas. That's the problem." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "We can't keep doing this. You have to decide what you want." The conversation stretched late into the night, filled with tears and admissions. Silas confessed he had been unhappy for months, feeling trapped in a routine that no longer fit. I shared my own fears about never finding real love because of the walls I had built. By morning, we had agreed to no contact until he sorted things with Holden. It was the right choice, but it left me hollow. I finished packing and drove to the airport, the Chicago skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. The flight to Seattle was quiet, my mind replaying every moment from the kiss onward. Landing in the Pacific Northwest felt like stepping into a new chapter, but the baggage followed me. My new apartment overlooked Puget Sound, the gray skies mirroring my mood. Work started immediately, and the team was welcoming. No one knew my history. For the first time in months, I breathed easier. But the nights were harder. Texts from old friends back home trickled in, some angry, some pitying. My family called less frequently, their disappointment lingering in short conversations. I joined a local LGBTQ support group, hoping for connection, but even there the stories of betrayal made me feel exposed. One guy shared how he had lost friends over a similar situation, and I nodded silently, wondering if I would ever escape the label. Silas broke the no-contact rule after 2 weeks. A simple text: "I miss talking to you." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked the rainy streets of Seattle thinking about the man I had left behind. The distance helped clarify things. I realized my feelings for Silas weren't just infatuation, they were rooted in a deeper need for understanding. But pursuing them had cost me everything. The internal crisis deepened as I questioned my worth. Was I doomed to repeat patterns of wanting what I couldn't have? A weekend trip to the mountains cleared my head somewhat. Hiking alone, I shouted my frustrations into the vast forest, the echo reminding me I was still here fighting. Back in the city, I started therapy again with a new counselor who specialized in gay men's issues. She helped me unpack the shame, the fear of rejection that had driven my choices. Slowly, pieces shifted. I wasn't just the hated man. I was someone capable of growth if I allowed it. News from Chicago filtered in through a mutual acquaintance. Holden and Silas were trying counseling, but cracks remained. I felt a pang of guilt mixed with relief. My absence had forced them to confront their own issues. Still, the isolation in Seattle weighed heavy. I missed the energy of Chicago, the familiar faces, even the ones that now scorned me. One evening, I received a long email from Holden. It wasn't forgiveness, but acknowledgement. He wrote about his pain, the way my actions had made him doubt everything. Reading it, I cried for the friendship we had lost. I replied with honesty, laying bare my feelings without expectation. The exchange didn't heal the rift, but it marked a turning point. I was no longer running from the hate. I was learning to carry it as part of my story. As winter approached, I volunteered at a local youth center helping gay teens navigate identity struggles. Their stories mirrored my own, the fear, the hope. Guiding them reminded me of my own journey, the choices that defined me. Silas texted again, this time with a photo of a book we had discussed. I smiled despite myself but didn't respond. The space was necessary for all of us. The emotional toll peaked one night when I sat alone staring at the water. The man I loved was still entangled in his old life, and I was building a new one alone. The awakening came slowly. Love wasn't about possession. It was about timing and respect. I had violated that, and now I had to live with the consequences. Seattle offered a blank canvas, but the colors of my past still bled through. I vowed to move forward, not for Silas or Holden, but for myself. Months in Seattle turned into a rhythm of work hikes and quiet reflection. The marketing campaigns I led earned praise from my new boss, and for the first time in ages I felt valued for my talent, not my connections. Colleagues invited me to weekend barbecues, and I accepted, cautiously sharing bits of my story without the full weight of the Chicago drama. The distance had dulled the sharp edges of the hate, but memories surfaced unexpectedly, like when a coworker mentioned a trip to the Midwest and my stomach twisted. Silas's messages slowed to occasional check-ins. He and Holden were still in counseling, working through trust issues my name rarely mentioned but always implied. I responded politely, keeping boundaries firm. One night he called, his voice tired. "Ryan, I think I'm going to move out." The words hung between us. I didn't offer comfort or promises. "You have to do what's right for you," I said. The call ended with mutual understanding but no plans. It was progress for both of us. Family visits were rare, but my sister flew out for a long weekend. We hiked Mount Rainier and talked late into the night. She admitted the family had been too quick to judge. "Mom asks about you," she said. "Dad too, in his own way." The conversation opened old wounds, but also healing ones. Being gay didn't make me less their son. It just made the path harder. Her support felt like a lifeline, pulling me from the depths of self-doubt. At the youth center, I mentored a 17-year-old named Tyler who was struggling with coming out to his parents. His fear mirrored mine at that age, and helping him navigate school bullying and family rejection gave me purpose. One session he asked if I had ever betrayed a friend for love. I paused, then answered honestly, "Yes, and it cost me everything. But it taught me that real growth comes from facing the consequences, not running from them." Tyler nodded, his eyes wide. The exchange reinforced my own lessons. Work brought a big project, a campaign for an LGBTQ nonprofit. I poured my energy into it, creating ads that celebrated authentic stories of resilience. The launch event was in downtown Seattle, and as I stood at the podium sharing my journey anonymously, the audience applauded. For the first time, the hate felt distant, replaced by pride in my survival. A surprise visit from Marcus, an old Chicago friend, shifted everything. He had business in Seattle and reached out. Over dinner, he shared how the group had started to question the narrative. Holden talks about missing the old days, he said. Silas seems lost. I listened without defending myself. The conversation ended with a hug and a promise to stay in touch. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a crack in the wall of isolation. Winter rains gave way to spring blooms. I started dating casually a nice guy named Ethan from the support group. Our dates were simple coffee walks, long talks about books and life. He knew parts of my story and didn't judge. With him, I felt seen without the complications of the past. Yet something held me back, the ghost of Silas and the lesson that love required timing. A letter from Holden arrived unexpectedly. It was handwritten, pages of reflection, anger softening into understanding. He didn't absolve me, but he acknowledged his own role in the relationship strain. I read it on a ferry crossing the Sound, the words bringing tears. I replied with gratitude and honesty, closing the chapter without demanding more. Silas called on a quiet evening. Ryan, I left him. The words landed softly. He sounded free, lighter. We talked for hours about his new apartment, his decision to focus on teaching and himself. I congratulated him but kept my distance. The call ended with mutual respect, no promises. It was the closure I needed. The growth accelerated. I joined a hiking club, met new friends who knew nothing of my past. Weekends in the Cascades cleared my mind, the vast landscapes reminding me how small my problems were in the grand scheme. I started writing a journal turned into a blog about gay men's emotional journeys, anonymous but raw. Readers responded with stories of their own. The community building online felt healing. One weekend, Ethan and I drove to Olympic National Park. Under towering trees, he asked about my future. I told him I was learning to love without attachment to outcomes. The conversation deepened our connection, but I knew I wasn't ready for more. The experience taught me patience with myself. Back in the city, I received an invitation to a virtual Chicago Pride event. I declined but watched from afar, seeing familiar faces. Holden and Silas weren't together in the photos, but both looked healthier. The sight brought peace, not pain. I had become the most hated man, but in losing everything I had found myself. Summer brought a promotion at work and a sense of stability. I volunteered more at the center, watching Tyler graduate and come out successfully. His thanks meant the world. The internal conflicts that once raged now settled into quiet acceptance. I was gay, proud, and worthy regardless of past mistakes. A final text from Silas arrived. I'm proud of you, Ryan. Take care. I smiled and replied the same. The chapter closed gently. Seattle had become home, not a hiding place but a foundation for the man I was becoming. The promotion brought new responsibilities and travel. I flew to conferences in Portland and San Francisco presenting on inclusive marketing. Each trip reinforced my growth, the confidence in my voice when speaking about authenticity. Colleagues from other cities shared their stories, and I realized my experience wasn't unique. Gay men everywhere navigated similar minefields of love, loyalty, and loss. Back home, Ethan and I grew closer. Our relationship remained light but meaningful. He introduced me to his friends, a diverse group of artists and activists. Their acceptance without knowing my full past felt refreshing. One dinner party, a woman asked about my Chicago days. I shared selectively the friendships, the betrayal, the lessons. No one flinched. It was liberating. News from Holden came through Marcus. He was dating someone new, a guy from his law firm. The update brought genuine happiness for him. Silas had taken a teaching job in a suburb focusing on creative writing. Their separate paths seemed right. I no longer carried the weight of their pain as my own. A family reunion in Chicago loomed. My mother insisted I attend. The thought of returning filled me with anxiety, but therapy helped me prepare. I flew back in late summer, the city familiar yet changed. The airport felt smaller, the skyline less intimidating. My sister picked me up, her hug warm. The reunion at my parents' house was tense at first. Dad avoided eye contact, but Mom pulled me aside. We were wrong to judge so harshly, she said. The words healed old scars. Over barbecue, we talked openly about my life in Seattle, the work, the friends. Holden wasn't invited, but word reached him. He sent a neutral text wishing me well. It was enough. I met Silas for coffee downtown. He looked good settled. We talked like old friends, no lingering tension. He thanked me for stepping back, for forcing the hard conversations. I wished him happiness and meant it. The meeting closed the final door gently. Walking away, I felt free. The trip strengthened family bonds. My brother, who had been distant, called later, admitting his own struggles with acceptance. We bonded over shared stories, the conversation a bridge I never expected. Returning to Seattle, I carried new peace. At work, a major client project took me to New York. The energy of the city reminded me of Chicago, but without the ghosts. I presented confidently, the audience engaged. Afterward, a young gay intern approached me, sharing his fears. I mentored him over lunch, the role reversal empowering. Ethan met me at the airport upon return. Our relationship deepened into something steady. We discussed the future openly, no pressure. The experience taught me that love could be healthy when built on mutual respect. The youth center celebrated Tyler's college acceptance. His speech mentioned my guidance and I choked up. The community I built here was real solid. Fall brought reflection. I updated my blog with a post about forgiveness, not for others but for self. Comments poured in, stories of similar journeys. The response validated my path. A call from Holden surprised me. He was in Seattle for a conference. We met for drinks, neutral ground. The conversation was honest. He shared his growth, I shared mine. No apologies needed, just understanding. He left with a handshake and I felt the last chain break. Silas emailed a photo of his new classroom. Proud of you, he wrote. I replied with a photo of the sound at sunset. The exchange was light, positive. The emotional journey had come full circle. From hated to healed, I stood taller. The choices had shaped me into a man who valued integrity above fleeting desires. Seattle's rain no longer felt cold. Felt cleansing. Winter holidays approached. I planned a trip home for Christmas, family ready to embrace the real me. The future stretched bright with possibilities. Holiday lights twinkled across Seattle as I prepared for the trip home. Ethan joined me for part of the festivities, his presence a quiet support. My family welcomed us both with open arms, the acceptance I had longed for finally real. Christmas dinner overflowed with laughter, stories shared without judgment. Dad even asked about my work, a small step that meant the world. Back in Seattle after the new year, I reflected on the year behind me. The kiss that shattered everything had ultimately rebuilt me stronger. I continued mentoring at the center, expanding the program to include more teens from rural areas. Their progress mirrored my own, the cycle of growth continuing. Work offered a leadership role, heading the diversity initiatives. I accepted it, excited to shape narratives that mattered. The team celebrated with a toast to new beginnings. Ethan and I moved in together, our shared apartment filled with books, plants, and plans for the future. The relationship felt balanced, no secrets, no shadows. A surprise package arrived from Holden, a book we had once discussed, with a note. Thought you'd like this. No drama, just kindness. I smiled reading it on the balcony, the city lights below. Silas sent a holiday card from his new life, full of updates and well wishes. The connections had evolved into something peaceful. Spring brought a conference in Chicago. I returned as a speaker, not the villain. The event focused on mental health in the LGBTQ community. My talk on resilience after betrayal resonated. Old friends approached afterward, some apologizing, others simply reconnecting. Holden attended, listening quietly. Afterward, we grabbed coffee, the conversation flowing easily. The hate had faded, replaced by mutual respect. Silas joined us for dinner one evening, the three of us sitting together without tension. Laughter returned, memories shared with warmth. The evening ended with hugs and promises to stay in touch. The circle had healed in its own way. Back home, I updated the blog with the final chapter of my journey. Readers responded with encouragement, the community stronger for the sharing. Ethan read it proudly, his support unwavering. Summer brought a proposal on a hike in the mountains. I said yes, tears in my eyes. The wedding plans were simple, family and close friends. My parents attended, beaming. Holden and Silas sent gifts with warm notes. The ceremony overlooking the sound was perfect. As I said my vows, I thought of the path that led here, the pain, the growth, the choices. Love had found its way, not through betrayal but through honesty and time. Years later, I looked back at that rainy night in Chicago as the catalyst for everything good that followed. The man I became was forged in fire but stood tall. The journey taught me that consequences shape us but don't define us. True or false? Following your heart is always worth the pain it causes others?